This is a list of computer parts I've used in my $3,000 gaming setup. Starting with the CPU, I paid $550 for a Ryzen 7 5800X, a MSI B450 mortar, 16GB of DDR4 3200MHz Corsair Vengeance RAM, and an Noctua D14 CPU cooler. I replaced the cooler with a Corsair iQ H100i RGB Pro XT, which I paid $140 for off Amazon. For storage, I bought a 1TB Crucial NVMe SSD, which cost me $125 from Amazon. For the GPU, I paid $850 for EVGA RTX 2070 from Amazon. I chose this card because it fitted my budget the best and was available at the time. For the power supply, I bought the Seasonic 750W 80 plus titanium rated, which cost me $400 at the time of purchase from Amazon. For the case, I bought the Corsair 220T. I chose this case because it is a compact ATX case. This means that it will fit a full-size ATX motherboard but is 30% smaller than the standard mid-tier case. This is perfect for my M-ATX board, as this case won't look too big and it will fit a 240mm radiator. The Corsair 220T also comes with 3 SP120 RGB Pro fans and an RGB controller, which means I can control all my fans from the iQ software. It also has magnetic dust filters and supports up to 6 120mm fans. This cost me $115 off of Amazon. For the peripherals, I bought the RAZER ORNATO V2 keyboard, which cost me $100. For the headset, I bought the RAZER KRAKEN for $50. For the mouse, I bought the RAZER DEATHADDER Essential V2 for $50. For the boom arm, I bought a no-brand professional heavy duty boom arm for $80. For a fan splitter, I paid $14 on Amazon. And for the mic, I bought the HyperX QUADCAST for $160. I also bought a 3-pack of SP120 RGB Pro fans. For the monitor, I bought the Dell Gaming S2721 HDF 27-inch curved 144Hz monitor for $400 off of Amazon. When building a computer, you want to start with the motherboard. This houses all the main components. So once you've unboxed it, you want to release the retention arm, then align the golden arrow in the corner of the CPU with the arrow on the CPU socket on the motherboard. Before moving on, you want to wobble it a bit to make sure you've seated it correctly, then tighten the retention arm. We now want to move onto the RAM. To do this, you need to undo the clips on each end of the RAM socket, then align the notch on the RAM module with the notch in the RAM socket. Then evenly apply pressure on both sides to click it into place. If you only have 2 sticks, refer to your motherboard's manual for optimal placing, but for most motherboards it's socket 2 and 4. If you're using an NVMe SSD, this is the time to install it. To do this, find the correct connector on your motherboard. If you cannot find it, refer to your motherboard's manual, as only some motherboards have it. Then remove the screw from the standoff and slide your NVMe SSD into place. Then re-tighten the screw to secure it. I'm now going to slide the motherboard out the way and open up the AIO. This isn't the normal order that it normally gets installed, but this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to be switching out the fans with my RGB fans I have here, and I'm going to do it with the case at the same time. I'm going to unbox it now while I have the space, because soon when I have the case set up on here, I won't have the space that I need to unbox it and set it up. For this build, I'm going with the iQ H100i RGB Pro XT. I chose this cooler because it's going to keep my temperatures down on my Ryzen 7 5800X, and it's going to look really clean in my PC build at the end. Making sure not to touch the thermal paste, I need to remove the stock Intel brackets and install the AMD mounting brackets. Removing the stock Intel brackets is really simple. All you do is you just pull them apart and they just unclip from each other. And then that's the same as installing the AMD brackets. You apply pressure inwards and they just clip straight on. I thought I was going to have to use the AIO to test the motherboard to make sure all the components work, but I found this air cooler which I'm going to use to test it. Testing it is very important to do before you assemble your whole PC build, otherwise then you have to pull it all apart to troubleshoot it. For testing purposes, I only need to plug in one cord, which is a CPU fan header. I don't need to plug in the RGB header or the USB cable just yet. Because my power supply is modular, that means that I can only plug in the cords I need to use, which I'll be using the 24-pin motherboard connector, I'll be using the PCIe cord and the CPU cords. Attaching the cords into the power supply is a very simple process. It is labelled right next to the connection port what cord goes where. I'm just going to plug the cords into the motherboard as I plug them into the power supply, just to make it easier. Now that all the cords are installed, I'm just going around pressing them to make sure they're all in properly, otherwise this could cause some issues when I'm testing. For testing purposes, I'm just going to be using this 2060 as it only requires one PCIe cord. This saves me from plugging in another one. This is the moment of truth. I'm going to short the starting pins with a screwdriver and watch it boot up. This is the moment we find out if it posts or not. The computer has posted successfully. This is good news. This means that all the parts work fine, and now it's time to deassemble it and reassemble it into the case. The case I will be using is the Corsair 220T. I chose this case because it is a compact ATX case. This means that it will fit a full-size ATX motherboard but is 30% smaller than the standard mid-tier case. This is perfect from a micro ATX board as the case won't look too big and it will fit a 240mm radiator. The Corsair 220T also comes with 3 SB120 RGB Pro fans and an RGB controller, which means I can control all my fans from the IQ app. It also has magnetic dust filters and supports for the 6 120mm fans. I've just removed both side panels and put them securely back in the box in between the foam so I don't scratch or damage any of them. I've also undid the cables to make it easier to work with, and now I'm taking out the hard drive tray because I will not be using any hard drives in this build. Removing the hard drive tray was very simple. There was one screw on the side and then there's 4 screws on the bottom, and that was it. The case comes with a cardboard box in between the hard drive cage. This is very important to have as it says all the screws for your case. Now that I have the case ready, I'll be installing the fans in the case, and I'll also be installing the fans at the radiator while I'm here. Installing the fans into the radiator is definitely the most annoying part of this build for me. This was a very long process and it was really hard to screw them in there. Now that the fans are screwed to the radiator, I just want to go around tightening them and make sure that they're all tight. Not too tight that they're over tightened, but make sure they're tight. Now I'm going to adjust the standoffs in the case to make sure they fit the standoffs in my motherboard. I did install the motherboard, but then I realized that one of the standoffs were off, so I had to uninstall it and then reinstall the standoff and then reinstall the motherboard. When building computers, the general rule of thumb is to install everything with a crisscross pattern. That means you tighten one screw, then you go across and tighten the other screw. For this I'd go for each corners, then go on the insides. This is to make sure it's properly aligned. If I was to do it all just down the left hand side, then it could be out of aligned to the right, or it could not be installed properly. This is the same with the CPU cooler. You should always do it crisscross pattern, like you're tightening a tire. To install a fan, hold up against the back of the case where the fan holes are, then you get 4 fan screws, put them in each hole. Just tighten up with your hand a tiny bit and then use a screwdriver. You want to make sure that you're doing a crisscross pattern like you're tightening up a tire. I'm going to be top mounting my radiator, so to install I'm just going to sit it above the top and screw in the screws to the top. My camera went flat, but this is what it should look like on top. You are supposed to use 8 screws, but I've only used 4. I'm using 6 SP120 RGB Pro fans. So to do this, at the very front bottom is number 1, then the front middle is number 2, the top front is number 3, 4, 5, 6, so on to the back. To power the fans, I just bought this $10 fan splitter off of Amazon. All these cords can look scary, but they're really simple when you get the hang of it. Here's a few ones. This is the CPU power. This here is the motherboard power, so that aka the 24 pin power. That there will be powering all your motherboard, and if you have a low end graphics card that doesn't require external power, then that will also power that graphics card. But for me, I'm using the RTX 2070, so I will need PCIe power, which is this cord here. My 2070 needs a lot of power to run, so I'll be requiring 2 of these PCIe cords to power it. My camera did go flat, so I didn't record me installing the graphics card or the radiator, but here's some photos.